Welcome to Real Money, Real Experts, a podcast where leading financial counseling and coaching experts share their stories, their challenges, and their advice for helping people manage money in the real world. I'm your host, Rachel DeLeon, Interim Executive Director of the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education, or AFCPE.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Mary Bell Carlson, an accredited financial counselor, or AFCE, and the CEO of Carlson Consulting. Every episode, we're taking a deep dive into the topics that personal finance professionals care about, helping clients, building community, and your professional growth. Today, we are excited to welcome Josh Escalante Troesh and Garrett Philbin to the show. Josh is a CFP and a tenured professor specializing in personal finance and entrepreneurship. He is a co-founder of Financial Coaches Network, a business incubator and accelerator that supports entrepreneurs in building their businesses. He's been quoted in Forbes, CNBC, Consumer Reports, U.S. News and World Report, and dozens of other media. Garrett started financial coaching in 2015, and he built a successful financial coaching business, growing it to over $80,000 of revenue in the first 4 years. He holds his AFC certification and is the founder of the Financial Coaches Community Facebook group with over 5,000 members. He is also the co-host of the Financial Coaches Network podcast. Welcome, Garrett. Welcome, Josh. We're so glad you came to the show today.
Garrett, let's start with you. You wrote an article for kitces.com in 2017 that seemed to really be the beginning of your path to coach other business owners. Tell us about your journey to starting a successful financial coaching business.
Ooh, that is a lot, but in a great way. I think first and foremost, that Kitces article, when I wrote it, I was only about 2.5 years in. So the podcast that Josh and I have, we talk about imposter syndrome a fair amount, and I had a whole lot of it writing that article, but it still resonated with lots and lots of coaches. And I bring that up because also when I was getting started as a financial coach, I had a lot of imposter syndrome as well, and wondering if I could do this, how I could do this. And I just kind of leapt in and started the business. There are definitely pros and cons to that approach, and many things I would have done very differently. But taking that leap did allow me to get started and just dive right in. And, I originally came from the world of the music business. So it was a complete career shift. I know that there are many people in the Facebook group that are career changers as well. And I just really tried to do at least some initial research, saying like, okay, well, what do financial coaches do? What other financial coaches are out there? Which also led me to starting the Facebook group. And there was just a lot of trial and error in the beginning, because to be honest, I didn't do a great job at finding community, at having conversations with a lot of other coaches. I found a lot of financial planners, but not a lot of financial coaches. And so I spent a lot of time kind of doing things and trying things out. Whereas if I would have spent more time connecting with other people and learning from what they'd already done, I would have saved myself a lot of time and a lot of heartache.
I think it's interesting, too, that I met you very early on in those early years. And as your career has developed and changed, it is a growth pattern, right? It's not a perfect one-stop solution. Now, Josh, you've had a very different career start than Garrett. Tell us a little bit about how you got in the business and started Financial Coaches Network with Garrett.
Background is really in marketing. So both of my degrees are in marketing. And when I started teaching college classes, it was actually around internet strategy, marketing, and those types of areas. And I kind of came to financial services, we'll call it, in a roundabout way through the marketing department. I was a vice president of marketing and business development for a credit union. 2008, that was a very bad year to be a bank executive, so that ended abruptly.
Yeah.
And I started teaching a lot more personal finance classes around that time. I learned a lot more about the non-sales side of the industry, and that's kind of how I started it. I started that journey toward opening up my own firm, and then ultimately, becoming a part of FCN with Garrett. I was watching what he was doing, and we connected and decided that financial coaches, there was a lot of support for the coaching side of financial coaching, but there wasn't a lot of support for the marketing side and the operations side. And so that's what FCN is really for, is the marketing, the sales, and the operations side of the business.
Garrett, pivoting a little bit, you mentioned earlier that you entered this field as a career changer. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that place. A lot of times people who enter this field often have something that they walked through financially. I'm curious, what made you pivot from the music business to the personal finance space?
I wish I could say there was some kind of master plan, but it kind of surprised me. So I had studied music business in college. That's what my degree was in. I'd worked in the music industry for about 5 years in New York, and I just realized I didn't love the music industry and kind of had this crisis of conscience. And I was like, well, what do you do when what you went to school for and what you've done for the first 5 real years of my working life aren't what I want to do? And so there were a lot of challenging conversations, both like internally in my head and then with some of the co-founders as we realized we wanted to go separate ways. And it was actually one of my co-founders. We would have multiple hour-long conversations multiple times a week because we were trying to figure out what to do. And I still remember it in my mind, like he was sitting on the chair and I was lying down on the couch in the music production studio, kind of like a therapy session. And at one point he was like, you know what? You love to teach, you love to mentor. For some reason, you nerd out around personal finance more than anyone else I've seen. Is there anything there? And it was so interesting because like a light bulb went off where these like connections were made in a way I'd never thought before. And I just couldn't get it out of my head. I remember going back home and writing down all these ideas in Evernote of like ways that I could help people around money or with their money. Because I also saw a lot of my friends needing support and working in New York and making that quote unquote good money, which to me was like close to 100K and up, and just like not having anything to show for it, feeling behind, comparing themselves to other people, and just like not being where they wanted to be. And so I was just like, how can I help the people around me who I see that are struggling? And so I reached out to a lot of financial planners, financial advisors, fairly quickly learned that that wasn't what I wanted to do. Not because I actually connected with too many of the sales type people. I actually made a lot of friends and connections with the people at the XY Planning Network. But I just realized rather than doing comprehensive planning or estate planning, investment planning, college planning, I was like, I want to help people a lot more with the behavioral side, with the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day, week-to-week. What's coming in, what's going out, where is it going? Is it alignment with your priorities and values? What stuff is coming up around your money stories and the scripts that's getting in the way? And that I just didn't hear as much of. That wasn't the way that their business models were really set up. It's kind of a different service offering. That's when I was like, well, I'm just going to go start this. And again, kind of the pro of having my approach of just jumping in with both feet is I got started and dove right in. And the downside was like, well, would have been a little bit helpful to have some more framework around what it could look like before flailing around for a couple of years. But yeah, that was the kind of circuitous and serendipitous path of how I came to even think that I would want to do this.
Well, and it's interesting too. I'm sure a lot of the jumping in feet first and learning as you go, you've now been able to step back, and having gone through some of those early struggles, you can help others navigate those a little better.
Yes. One of the things that we've offered, people can just jump on a 20-minute call with me. And so I've had some people jump on calls and they're like, I really want to build my coaching business, or here's what I want to do, and I just don't know the right path. And it's been really interesting how many of these calls where at the end of it, they're kind of like, I don't even know what I want to do with my life anymore, but this is great. Because they have this idea of what they think they want to do or why they should do it. And we just get into a conversation of like, what do you really want? And why do you want to start this? And what do you want it to look like? And what's really underneath that? And I think, like you said, having that experience and starting multiple different businesses in different industries, it's helped me to have some perspective to help people not just go on the path they think they should go on, but say, okay, yeah, what is it that you really want? Which I think any good coach, that's really the most important thing they can do.
So Garrett, some people get into this industry by deciding they want to go into financial counseling or financial coaching, and they immediately seek out a certification. You started working as a financial coach and then recently became AFC certified. What made you decide to earn the AFC?
Good question. I think probably what had me not get the AFC earlier was a mixture of a couple different things. I would say a little bit of hubris, if you will, and a little bit of feeling like I had to try and get the business up to a certain point where I was like, oh, I just don't have time for this yet. And that's part of my own struggle I've been working through of like time scarcity and not feeling like I have enough time. But I actually took the coursework. I did the coursework for the AFC through distance learning at Texas Tech back in late 2016 or early 2017. So did all the coursework and then just never took the exam. So I actually, to give myself a little bit more credit, after working with clients for about a year and a half or so, I was like, okay, I'm doing a pretty good job and I think I know a decent amount, but also I probably should do this, like figuring out what I don't know and making sure that I am doing a better job at identifying what my potential blind spots are. And so that's why I initially went and did the coursework with the intention of taking the exam, then just ultimately pushed off taking the exam, but wish I would have done it earlier. There's just a part of me that after I took the exam, after I'd put it off for a while, just like felt a lot more committed to the continuing education piece, or at least in that structured way, which I think is a very important piece. I do love to learn on my own, but there's something really beneficial to the way that y'all set it up.
And I'll throw in that I'm sure it's the same for the AFC. I know it's the case for the bar exam, the CPA exam, the CFP exam, et cetera, et cetera. The sooner someone takes the test after the coursework, the higher percentage chance they have of passing. Meaning, when you look at people who take the exam right away after the coursework, that group has the highest percentage pass rate, and it drops as you look at groups who take it further and further out.
Josh, that's so true. I think, we always tell people who are going through the program, take it while it's in your head. We do review sessions and we say, get that date on the calendar, because the longer you wait, the more apprehensive you get and it becomes easier to put it off.
And the tax law changes and you have to start all over again.
That's it.
So true. So true. Hey, Josh, let me jump over to you. Both you and Garrett did a podcast that we'll include in the show notes a while back about certification versus licensure. And I want to jump into this. So Garrett's talked a little bit about certification. I want to jump into licensure with you because this is one of the most common questions that I get about financial coaching is, do I need to be registered to become a financial coach? Can you give us like your 2-minute version of that?
Yeah, so let's start with defining license and certification in like a 10-second quick version. Most professions, the license and the certification are the same. So bar exam gives you both. With financial services, there is the license, which gives you the legal right to do something. And there is the certification, which certifies that you actually know what you're talking about. There are lots of people who, in fact, there are entire companies in financial services that are multi-level marketing companies, and the advisors that they have, the experts that they have, the financial coaches, because they're starting to call themselves financial coaches as well, that they have. My students halfway through the semester have had more testing and more education on personal finance than the advisors do, because the license is literally a 1 week of study and a 30-minute test. And so it's very important that we look at it. The certification, like the AFC, is what says you know what you're doing so that you're at least less likely to harm a client. The license is, I have a legal ability to do something. A lot of people say, well, no, you don't need to be licensed to be a financial coach. And I don't like that phrasing. I don't like that presentation of it, because it's not really true. You don't need to be licensed in order to talk with someone about budgeting, about debt, and about accounts at financial institutions that are insured and guaranteed by the federal government as to both principal and interest. Said another way, savings accounts and checking accounts at FDIC and NCUA insured credit unions and banks. So if that's what you're talking about with clients, you're right. You don't need to have any license for that. Once you move into talking about life insurance, where you move into talking about investments, where you move into talking about their 401k, estate planning, taxes, there are a whole host of laws, and they vary from state to state, so it's not that there's even one answer that can be given, of what licenses you would need to talk about each of those things and to what degree. Already, there are states where if you are providing financial guidance, we'll call it, to people, it does not matter whether you call yourself a financial coach, financial counselor, whatever, you have to be registered as an investment advisor. So there are already states that have put that out there. And so I don't like it when people say that, because while technically it's true with a very, very limited scope, it can be very, very misleading for people. And I'm not saying that all financial counselors and financial coaches need to go out and get licensed and everything else. It's just important that they have an understanding that that answer is going to depend on what I talk about with clients, and it's going to depend on what state that I live in.
Thank you. I agree. I think that there's so much that we don't talk about on this with financial coaching. I think one of the best articles I've ever read is actually on your website about, do you need to be licensed as a financial coach? And we'll make sure and also include that in the show notes today. But I think this is a really important conversation to have with those that are thinking about getting into financial coaching, because whether you've said this before, whether you're intentionally trying to skirt around it or whether you're innocently just trying to help other people, you need to know these things, because these are really important parts of people's life, is their personal finances, and it can be detrimental to them if you don't know what you're doing.
I'm curious, this question could be for Garrett or for Josh, but we're hearing the word financial coach, financial counselor, a lot of these words used interchangeably. And at AFCPE, we have sort of an idea about the differences between the two of them. We often say that financial coaching is a technique that whether you're a planner or a counselor that you use, where you're putting the person first, you're holding that person in the center as the expert in their life, and you're moving them forward toward financial well-being. For lack of better terminology, I think the term coach is sexy, and it sounds better to a consumer than a counselor, but oftentimes they're doing very similar work. I'm curious what your thought is there.
I 100% agree that, coach being the kind of seemingly sexier title. Or originally, I think I was like, oh, maybe I'll call myself like a financial life coach. That's pretty hip. Like just put all the buzzwords together that people want. It kind of reminds me, not directly, but having some like similarities to the certification versus licensure, where it's like sometimes it's defined as the actual what the person's like job is, or maybe a better way of putting it, like the profession, if you will. So like a financial coach versus a financial planner, and kind of what the technical differences are. Okay, financial planner can work with investments. Financial coach generally doesn't work with investments, kind of helps people get to the point where they could work with a financial planner, where they have the foundation set. But it's interesting to hear the definition that you use, where I also 100% agree that financial coaching is more of a verb than just a noun. And it's something that can be done by coaches, financial counselors, financial planners, investment advisors. And so it's more of the practice. I think in the past, I've defined it more from the kind of job duties, if you will, and saying, okay, so financial coaches, and trying to put a barrier between just in people's minds of like, okay, financial planners. And this is again how I define financial planners from like the fee-only fiduciary standpoint, because that's everyone who I talk to when getting into the field of financial coaching. And then I realized like, well, holy crap, apparently that's not the entire world of financial advisors and planners. Who knew? And so, I also understand like with my own journey has colored how I answer that question. And I've generally described it more as, financial coaches help people with financial basics in addition to helping them with their mindset and behaviors in order to get them to the place where they are able to get out of debt, where they have enough savings to feel comfortable. And then when they're able to like have enough both money and the habits and behaviors in place to be able to take the next step and work with a financial planner.
To us, we've always sort of considered financial coaching as a verb, and I don't know that there is a right or wrong answer. It's just hard in the field that is so full of alphabet soup from a client perspective to understand the differences between counseling, coaching, planning, therapy when they're all used so interchangeably.
Josh, I have to ask you as a fellow academic, though, do you feel that there is a need for a standardized definition of financial coaching?
Is there a need? Yes. It is very difficult for that to be created, though, without some form of government intervention. And this is kind of where my unpopular answer comes in, which is there is no difference between financial counseling and financial coaches because everyone kind of gets to define it however they want. There's a lot of overlap in how people define it. And to the consumer, there isn't a difference. It's just different marketing terminology. The same problem occurs within the financial advising, financial planning field. You know, anyone can call themselves that. You can't call them yourself a certified financial planner or a CFP, but anyone can call themselves a financial planner or a wealth advisor or a money manager or a fill in the blank. And it is oftentimes done to confuse the public, to muddy the waters. You know, the insurance agents and stockbrokers used to have insurance agent on their business card. Nowadays they don't very often. It's almost always something else. And I think until there's a governmental oversight of, you know, this title can only be used under this circumstance. Until that type of thing exists, I think I would love there to be a definition, but I think it's dangerous for groups to start creating unenforceable definitions because it opens up the opportunity for confusion amongst the consumer and for other people to kind of co-opt these terms and these definitions. Now, one thing that could happen, NAPFA for a while in the financial planning world had a trademark on fee-only financial planner, meaning you could not use it unless you had permission from NAPFA. And trademark law is how the CFP and the AFC also protect their designations. And so that is a way to do it, but as I'm sure you both are well aware, defending a trademark, it's not extraordinarily costly from a financial standpoint, but it is very costly from a time standpoint. And it can get costly from a financial standpoint as well, but really it's the time it takes in order to make sure that you're well defended when a court case comes around, because ultimately that's how you defend it.
Josh, I also think it's really interesting with your marketing background too, because you mentioned what people put on a business card. And right now it's what consumers want to hear, right? Or what they think they want to hear and whatever helps make those sales better and better. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I mean, take a look. You can look at, you know, a lot of the products from, and I keep beating up on the insurance industry. I love insurance. I think it's really important. Right. The industry, however, has had some marketing problems in their past with regard to how they market things. But, you know, there are certain products where the names of the products have like 20 or 30 different marketing names, and they literally just sort of go through them. Oftentimes multi-level marketing, not just in financial services, but in general, they will change their names because they kind of like ruin their reputation, and so they change their name. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens with the titles of financial advisors. So we're not beating up on insurance completely. You look at high yield bonds. You know, in the 80s, they were called junk bonds. Then they were called high yield bonds. Then they were called yield augmented bonds. Then they were called extended yield bonds. And the reason why is because everyone bought them. Then they realized, oh, these are paying high interest rates because all these companies are going bankrupt. Like literally, some of them are in bankruptcy court. And everyone loses all their money and no one wants to touch it. So we have to come up with a new branding for these things to get people to buy them. And yeah, I think that it's very much a potential danger.
And it's not just a regulatory issue or a legislative, it's a marketing. There's so many components of this that are wrapped up into it. Not just a simple, standard, straightforward, let's come up with a definition and move forward. Thank you.
Garrett, let's pivot back to the topic today of careers. And many of our professionals are interested in starting a private practice or have dabbled in private practice or might be interested in turning their side gig into a full-time private practice. What advice would you offer to someone who's going down this career path?
A, make sure it's what you want to do. B, find community. And then C, get support around the business building side of it. It's something that I see a lot in the coaches in the financial coaches community and from my own experience where A, I got clear on, okay, this is what I want to do 100%. Then B, I kind of unfortunately missed the community step. But C, I had at least some business experience, but there's a big, big difference between being a good practitioner or being a good coach and then being a good business owner. Because you can be a fantastic coach and have no one sign up, and then those skills go to waste. And so that's one of the reasons why we started Financial Coaches Network is there's so many people that want to be financial coaches or counselors and that are really, really talented and are good at it or have a lot of experience doing it for nonprofit groups or just other companies. And then they want to start out on their own. And then they aren't successful in the way that they want to be because it's a very different animal being a successful business owner. And that's why when Josh reached out and we initially were talking, I was like, oh yeah, his perspective, I think why we've worked well together is that he brings a very different perspective and his experience. And so by kind of like Captain Planeting it, with our powers combined, we were able to bring our unique perspectives and our experiences. I oftentimes bring the perspective of like, here's what not to do. And then Josh gets to say, and also here's what to do and why, because he's taught or worked with, I think it's over 1,000 entrepreneurs and teaches entrepreneurship. So it's a really nice balance of having the two and being able to really say, hey, if I haven't done this entrepreneurship thing before, let me get support. Because it can seem really nebulous. It can seem like there are 500 million people telling you to do 500 different million things to be successful. Like, if you start a newsletter, you'll be successful. If you start a blog, if you go on TikTok, if you do social media. And there's more of I don't want to say like a step-by-step foolproof process that only you can get from FCN, but there are particular things in particular orders that are really helpful for you to have the highest chance of being successful as a business owner. And I'll let Josh fill in.
Yeah, I think that one of the things as well that's really important, and Garrett kind of talked to it, which is there is so much out there that you can do. We just had an office hours last night, and this is very common with new people going through our launch program, and they, it's extremely common where they're like, I feel like I'm so far behind. It's because there is always more that you can do when you run a business. Mm-hmm. A business is like being in a abusive relationship because all it knows how to do is take. It just takes from you. And so in addition to knowing what to do, it's really helpful to know what you don't have to do now. And I think that's one of the big things for anyone listening to this. If you're thinking about starting a business, be very, very careful about where you get your information from. There's a lot of, it's all rainbows and unicorns and it's easy pitches out there for starting businesses. And, there's a lot of, here's all the things you have to do. And you will always feel behind. You will always have analysis paralysis because there's always more to do. And just figuring out what you don't need to do is oftentimes more important than figuring out what you do. Everything you say yes to, you've said no to 99 other things.
The joys of being a business owner, right? And I think this is why it's such a great connection between AFCPE and Financial Coaches Network is that you all provide that business support. And then we also provide community. Garrett, that's one of the things you've consistently named throughout this podcast is community. And there's communities for you at any point in phase, right? Certification community, membership community, while also the financial coaches community as well. So know that you don't have to start your coaching adventure alone and really reach out to as many communities and get involved as much as you can. Now, to wrap up their show, we always ask our guests this question or your 2 cents. So these are the biggest takeaways for our listeners. If you had one piece of advice to offer financial professionals, what would it be?
Get clear on what you really want and only do things that you genuinely feel help you get closer to that. Maybe just a little bit of expansion is like there'll be so many different ways that you can present your business, different ways of marketing it. And a lot of times coaches or business owners will do things because they feel like they have to. Anyone can be successful doing it in any kind of way. Make sure that the way you do it resonates with you because then you'll stick with it when the suck happens, which happens a lot as a business owner.
I'm going to do a twofer. And
you
that
would.
is, I would. What did I? And that is, the biggest piece of advice that I can get, and I'll wrap it up into one concept, which is check your hubris. So this comes from the perspective of it doesn't matter how well you were able to get your finances in order. That is a sample size of 1. You need to have an understanding of other people's situations, a deeper understanding of personal finance. That's where things like certification can come in. You need to have support and help with regard to your ability to start a business, to run a business. You need to have help and support with regards to your ability to manage the client relationship. That goes from having the initial sales calls all the way through to how do you guide a client to make hard decisions that they don't want to make once they are a client. And you need to not view how you run your business or your career the same way that you view how you run your finances. There is this elevation of the idea of being frugal. That is this is the thing that you should be if you're in a personal finance space. But it's really important to realize that spending money on your career or on your business is not the same thing as spending money to go out for sushi. Because your career and your business generate income. And the more you spend on them, the more you invest into them. You shouldn't be looking at spending on your career and your income as though it was spending. It's not your budget, it's your 401k. It's investing into your 401k. And that's a really, really important thing to have an understanding of. And a lot of it comes from this idea of hubris of, well, I already know everything I need to know to help other people. Or, I'm sure I can run a business. Or, I'm successful with my financial life, so I'm going to manage my business and my career in the same way. And you can't.
Thank you both for joining us on the show today. Please tell our listeners where they can connect with you.
Probably the easiest way to connect to us is Financial Coaches Network, because you don't have to have a Facebook page for it. So you can go to financialcoachesnetwork.com, and you can also email us at info@financialcoachesnetwork.com. For any of you who are interested in starting a business, there's a bunch of free resources on the Start Here page. So when you go to the website, you can click on Start Here and it'll take you to a bunch of free resources. And Garrett, you want to talk about the Facebook group?
And if you are on Facebook, there is a Facebook group called the Financial Coaches Community. And there are just about 5,000 other current or aspiring coaches in there. We have some really great conversations, free resources available there as well. And like we spoke about, community, community, community.
Thank you both very much for joining us. And we're so glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Mary, it was so great talking to Garrett and Josh today. I met Garrett at FinCon many years ago when he was pursuing the AFC through Texas Tech's distance learning program. And what really struck me about him even then was his passion for learning and connecting with others, which is something we really value at AFCPE. Since then, he's gone on to build a successful practice, earn his AFC designation, and team up with Josh to help support other financial coaches who really want to take private practice beyond that side gig and into a full-time career. I love how vulnerable he is about his missteps and how willing he is to share what he's learned with others. Private practice is still a relatively new career path for financial counselors and coaches, but one I think that is really intriguing to many. The AFC provides the knowledge for financial counselors and coaches to work effectively with clients, but many AFCs are new to entrepreneurship. So the resources that FCN is building are a really strong asset to our field. I appreciate the business experience that Josh brings to their partnership and that he really understands the value of certification, specifically the AFC, as an important commitment that all financial counselors and coaches should be making to their clients.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rachel. I vividly remember meeting Garrett years ago before he'd even written the article for Kitsis or anything. And he was a solopreneur up in New York City. And we just sat down and chatted about financial coaching and its nuances. And I swear, he is one of those guys that always has a smile on his face. He's warm, he's welcoming, and I think that's why people just gravitate to him. He is the perfect person to put together a financial coaches network because he just exudes connectivity. Even though he was a solopreneur, I just feel like he needed and shows that networking and connecting with other people just makes you thrive. After he wrote that article, I saw him at FinCon, and he's just been doing so many great things ever since. I'm so grateful for them for bringing up financial coaching, because we do talk a lot about financial coaching and counseling, and there's nuances between the two, but all in all, we fit and work together very, very well. Personally, I really love that Josh also brings in his credibility with it, and I just think the two of them are a dynamite team together that are really helping those that are wanting to get into private practice. Or if you're already in private practice, it's a great way to make it a successful practice. And this is what I'm seeing Josh and Garrett do, is making it so that so many others can thrive in this practice of financial coaching. If you enjoyed the show today, please share it with a friend. This helps others discover the podcast and become a part of our community.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.